start off by saying that this meeting is being televised and is being recorded for broadcast on the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. And with that, communications, I did go down to check the box, and there was absolutely nothing in it, so we have absolutely nothing to say, although I do know that there was an email that went around that the planning board is having a public hearing about marijuana coming up soon. So be on the lookout for that. I don't have that information in front of me. Do we have any comment from anyone on the committee? No comment? Okay. Any comment from anybody in the public? We have no comments from anybody in the public. Again, just to clarify, just before the meeting came up, one question was brought up regarding the studies, the Vertex study that was done on the public buildings and where to find that. And since that's going to be an ongoing discussion, I would encourage people to go to the Lunenburg, Mass website and look up the property condition studies, just to refresh as the discussion continues to go on well, I guess until it's finally resolved, which basically this has been discussions that have been going on for certainly the entire time I've been on the Finance Committee, and I'm going to assume for years before that. But anyway, moving on to our agenda, we're going to start with John Henshaw, the discussion regarding free cash.
Okay.
And I assume that that also gets a little bit into new growth.
It does indeed.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. Well, actually, mostly new growth, and some of that is free cash. And so just to give you a brief synopsis, I've passed out to everyone the draft version of what I've looked at for new growth for the past 11 years, from 2008 to 2018. If you look down the column 3 gives you the residential new growth by year as applied to the levy limit. And then column 4 is residential and commercial new growth together. Now, a couple things here. First of all, the total revenue from new growth, revenue to the town from new growth for this 11-year period is about $3,329,000. So it's fairly significant. If you look at the table, the last line on the table, the 11-year total line, that accounts for about 1.7% of the total amount raised by the levy for the last for the 11-year period. So it's not overwhelming, but it is a significant part of the total growth that the town experiences. If you add the way to look at this is that, and Karen Brochu can probably clarify this if I get run or at least can probably elaborate some on this. But the 2.5, every year we increase the levy by 2.5% of the prior year's levy. This over this 11 years, that means on average, there was a 1.7% per year increase based on new growth. But I want to go back just to get a little further with that. If you look at the final column number 8, you'll see that although the average is 1.7%, you've got a great deal of difference year to year in new growth. It ranges from 0.8% of the total of the previous year's levy to 2.5%, depending on in each of the in various years. For instance, 0.8% was in FY10, and 2.3% was FY17. So there's some variability in the amount of new growth we have in the town, which is which means that you can't, we can't really plan on new growth being a specific amount or a specific percent of the prior year's levy, because it has a pretty wide variance. So for not unlike free cash, it's one of those things that we can't. It's not predictable or not stable year to year to year, as the standard 2.5% increase is. The other issue, just to point out, is that residential new growth accounted for about 3/4 of total new growth. The reason, and commercial new growth accounted for about the other 22%. And the reason that's an important distinction is that my understanding is that new growth from residential growth is linked to population growth, which in turn is linked to demand, more closely linked to demand for government services. That commercial new growth is more just out there, and stores and other establishments. It has less of a claim on government resources, though I'm certain there is some claim on government resources, local government resources, like police having to stop by the local stores, etc. But that means that about 22% of the new growth is less of a less. I don't want to use the word encumbered, but yes, tied up in anticipated future claims on local government resources, which is where this whole my interest in this topic started. I can stop now, and if anybody has questions.
I have questions.
Nope. Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Commercial new growth and residential, does residential new growth include the places like Tri-Town?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And does residential growth also include when someone does building improvements on their home?
It does. So there is somebody builds a retaining wall?
Right.
Yep, sure, it does. And that part of new growth would in fact occur where we'd have the revenue, but not necessarily an increase in demand for local services.
Right.
So good point. My assumption, and Karen, maybe you can clarify this, my assumption is that the new growth, the residential new growth that is associated with, say, improvements in current houses, is not a large part of the total residential new growth. Would that be a correct assumption?
I would believe that is a correct assumption, yes.
Okay.
But we don't know that.
Maybe.
Or we don't know what percentage of that would be based on
growth.
building permits pulled for. Okay.
And probably go downstairs to the planning department and the assessors department and find out.
Right.
I'll make a note to do that then, because that is a good point, Terry.
And then the other question is on, column 8, which gets to the amount that's applied to the limit as a percent of prior year levy limit.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is basically the 1.7% is in there, and then the 2.5% is on top of that.
No, that's that the 1.7% is just an arithmetic calculation of the 11-year total.
Okay.
But the year-by-year total, again, ranges from 0.8% to 2.6%.
Okay, let me go back
Per year.
to then a 1 year. Let's say we picked 2015, there was 1.4%.
Yep.
And then the 2.5% is applied on top of that.
Oh, I see what you mean, sure, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, that's one of the things that, one of the additional calculations we should probably do with that is segregate out new growth, say in 2015, to take your example, and then from any year on, new growth increases the levy limit, so therefore that in subsequent years is grows by 2.5%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mark, any questions?
No.
No? Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
And so just one more call out. I wanted to thank Karen Brochu. I met with Heather and Karen, mostly about making sure that the numbers were sourced correctly and used correctly, but also we had a more general discussion about new growth. And just to get to tie up one of the things you mentioned at the beginning, there is an association between new growth and free cash, in that when we budget for new growth, it's currently it's about $375,000, so to the per year. So that's what the budget is based on. But as you can see, FY17, FY18, new growth was $488,000, $481,000 successively. So therefore, there was about roughly little over $100,000 in each year that exceeded the 275,000. So could you clarify that, please?
If there is an increase in growth from what we estimated at the town meeting versus what actually happens, we typically take care of that at the special town meeting we have in the fall. So,
right. So it is consumed.
If there is a difference between the estimated versus the actual, we usually appropriate those dollars, because over the last several years, we have levied to the maximum allowable capacity.
Okay.
Right, and that's how they ended up with the playground last year,
Yep, okay.
was that new
Okey-doke.
growth dollars were certified and the funds then became available for appropriation.
All right.
Is that
Well,
correct?
the playground, right, the additional $25,000 that they needed for that project came from free cash.
Good. Well, that goes back then to my concern about the fact that over time, says new growth is associated with population growth. Population growth is associated with more demand on town services. And I just wanted, I thought maybe new growth was not consumed totally by operational expense. I guess it's not necessarily consumed totally by operational expenses, is it? Or
No,
is it?
it's not,
it's
because
not.
if you looked at even this year, I don't have the number in front of me, but a large portion of the capital plan was funded within
Okay.
those numbers.
That's perfect, because it's I think, remember, during our conversation, I mentioned capital as a potential use of the new growth or excess new growth, because then it's a non-recurring expenditure, and we can repoint it to, say, if new growth leads us to need more police officers, as an example, or more school personnel, then at least we might have some cushion to actually make that expenditure.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Are you talking about a police car, for example?
Oh, yeah, police car would be, but I'm talking mainly about officers,
Okay,
yeah.
With officers comes police cars.
yes.
Yeah.
The capital expenditure
Yeah,
would be the police car for the operational
Yeah.
expenditure of the positions.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess what got me into this in the first place, interested in this, was that it's not that the growth in population would result in an automatic annual increase in demand for services. But over time, you get to use an overused phrase, a tipping point, where all of a sudden, yikes, we need 2 new or 3 or 4 new police officers. And it's not that it happened in any particular fiscal year, but over time, this department gets a little stressed. And so my concern was that if we did new growth entirely as a way to fund, say, operation expenses, we pretty much consumed all that. We may have circumscribed our flexibility to apply that to funding new additional police officers or school personnel. So this is a way to look at this in that standpoint and see whether there was any way to make sure we had a little more flexibility when that happened. Now, one thing that Karen said at the end of the meeting I thought was really clever was to take new growth as a take this spreadsheet. Say, look, we've realized $3.3 million in new growth in the last 11 years, which is addition to the levy. A portion of that is a good. That can be used as an argument for increasing whatever department we need to increase. And the argument, to my mind, works both ways. It says we've been taxing this new growth that ultimately results in needing more services, and we can afford some more services, but there's a ceiling to the amount of services we can afford. That's why I thought it was a particularly clever suggestion.
Correct, yeah, I thought that was a good meeting that we had.
Good. That's it. That's all I got. Took a little longer than I hoped, but got it.
Any questions for Karen on that discussion at all, or we're good? We're good? Okay. John, do you expect to take this discussion anywhere else? Or do you think that it was enough to just have the discussion and we don't really want to talk in terms of any kind of, I mean, I'm not sure it's worth discussing any type of policy development around new growth, especially considering that once all of the apartment buildings are completed, then that number can easily fall to. So, and I know that when you folks are setting up the budget, you're taking into account what you anticipate coming up for new growth. So right now, the amount you're budgeting is a conservative number. But when all of that other construction that you're anticipating dies down, then you'll be anticipating a smaller number.
Right.
So I would always expect that to be a conservative kind of estimate in terms of what new growth is expected to be.
Well, and the regional assessor, he's very conservative with his growth estimates because,
Yeah.
I mean, we would hate to appropriate those dollars and then have to go back and take money away
Right.
because we didn't get what we budgeted.
Right.
But, I mean, we try to push him as much as we can so that in May, when we're appropriating those dollars, they're as close to what the actual numbers are going to be. One of the things that I will say is we can have Harold's in the process of working on new growth now. So we could ask him the question that you had asked about how much of the dollars is related to home improvements versus new homes for residential. You know, we can get that breakdown from him so that we can take a look at that, because I think that would be an interesting component of this whole thing.
Right, 'cause it seems to be that when there's not new construction, then, I mean, yeah, I think it's, when people, right now, it looks like there's a lot of mobility in town in terms of houses being sold. So there, and I don't know what that means for the demographics of the town. But there are also periods where nobody's selling anything. Nobody's buying anything, but because they can't buy and sell, they're doing home improvement. So then that becomes the source of the new growth. So it's an interesting.
And then back to your initial question about whether we'll take this any further. I guess probably not. I mean, I'm going to pursue a couple of things that I'd like to, but I don't think they'll materially change the look that we've got. And I also agree with you that it's probably not, it doesn't seem to be worth the policy, because the policy sometimes locks us in. One of the things we want to do is make sure we're flexible enough to accommodate the various requirements we can't foresee.
Yeah, I will say that, because I know that there are certain municipalities out there that will use the new growth as a factor of, you know, they always allot this percentage to schools and this percentage to town side operations, just as a function of what they've perceived over time. But they also have a lot of other positions in the town halls that can do all those kinds of playing with numbers.
Oh, but and those may be larger towns where there's a little more stability in population demographics.
Right.
We, a lot of this stuff is driven as much by growth and by demographics as by population growth.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
so,
Okay, then George had to leave, so he
Thanks,
did
Karen.
leave his, a draft of what he's been working on with his dashboard. And I'll just go over
There you go,
briefly what
let's
he
see.
explained to me so that you can take a look at it.
Michelle?
Perfect. If you had it done for Karen.
Oh, yeah.
And he'll
Sorry.
have to, at the next meeting, he'll have to do a better job explaining
Oh.
it.
Phew. Although I'm sure he's very nice.
Well, actually, if we're talking about name tags, can we fix this one? We don't know what committee that is.
The selectmen can do it. I can let them know. Is it spelled wrong or?
Fananese.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's like an Italian pastry or something.
I'll talk to Elaine about
Thank you, that would be awesome.
I feel demoted.
Well, he just felt out there all by himself, because there was nobody else on the committee with him. All right, so basically what he did, the first page is what he's looking at in terms of, and all of this relates to borrowing.
Yep.
As part of a trend analysis, and you'll see over on one, across the bottom, you'll see that those are the years, and the principal and interest that he's talking about is along the left-hand column. And obviously, what's really driving the taxes at this point is, in terms of debt, is the exempt borrowing.
Yep.
But he also was looking at the trend line of the debt that's retiring, that's regular borrowing, and again, that goes back to, actually, I don't even have to remember what that goes back to, because if you go to page 3, that has the itemization of all of the borrowing that's regular borrowing, when it's set to be resolved, and how much, actually, it's just at that point when it's closing. I don't think, yeah, he doesn't have the amounts on that page, but it does indicate all of the items that currently are showing up under debt service. On page 2, he then is referring to the different numbers that are part of the fiscal debt policies. So when we talk about the total as an aggregate of debt service costs to the total levy, the excludable debt and the regular debt to the levy, he's just breaking those numbers out as well to show where we are in terms of percentage. And for example, this year, our total percentage for FY 2019 is currently operating at 12.25%, and that's down from a high of 13.7% from FY 2017 between the two.
I'll go ahead.
John?
Well, this may be a question for George. Do we know whether or not the percentage year to year changes solely as a function of how much principal and interest we're paying, or is it two functions, the principal and interest we're paying and the total levy?
It's both.
It's both.
But yeah, this is basically just as it relates to the fiscal debt policies and that percentage of what it is based on the total levy. So the blue line is the percent of aggregate debt service cost to total levy.
Okay.
And then just what the cap is per policy.
So George has projected the levy for through 2024.
Right, based
Okay.
on no future borrowing, which is not going to
Yep,
happen,
yep.
but based on no future borrowing. Yeah,
Well,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
John, you can-
No, then it does tell us how much headroom we have for, real headroom we have for the next several years. Good.
So I'm just curious on on page 4, it has track and field project as closed in 2015, because it's between 2014 and 16. How does that close? Is that not part of the school budget, which is part of the town, or, like, I don't understand, because isn't it always getting maintenance and?
Well, no, what he closed was the borrowing on the original replacement of the field.
Okay. I'm trying to understand that. I was like, where is
Okay.
that? We still keep that up to date?
Where the new one is, I don't know.
Okay,
And that would be a question for George.
because that's
He
a new,
basically
there is a
went-
new borrowing for
and
that.
He also called it draft because he hadn't finished.
Yeah,
But-
right.
But it was also, yes, that would be a question for George.
Okay.
But that was because, and that was one of the reasons why the discussion came up with setting fees now, because they had to cover the borrowing of the,
You know what, it is on here. Artificial turf field and track on page 3, I guess?
it's
Near
on
the
page
end?
3, right.
So would that be maybe the new one? Because that goes to
Because that's not
2029.
This page is just excludable.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
And yes, any other questions are probably best for George.
Okay.
But I thought he did an excellent job.
Yeah,
No, it
that's
looks
really
really
clear,
good.
very nice. Good
So
job.
this is what he's talking about in terms of what he would expect the dashboard to look like, in
Ah.
order to show some trends.
Sure. Very good.
So then we'll move on to Mark with the budget presentation tools.
Well, let's say we have agreed on a date now where we have our number party. And the idea is to get the last 5 years of data in the format I needed. And I think Karen will be busy. Once I have the data, I can upload it and then we can very quickly have a look
Okay.
in the committee and also at an extended population. And if we think it's worthwhile, then the tool is set up for the last 15 years. So then it's just adding more data.
Which actually it would be interesting to see how this also links in with what George is putting together as well, and finding some way to, hopefully this will just help people understand going forward where we're going and why.
Yeah.
And I think, again, as I think I was saying earlier, for people who are interested in trying to get a sense of what this might look like, one of the tools that we looked at was ClearGov. Is it cleargov.com?
Yeah. .org.
.org, cleargov.org, and the Lunenburg Public Schools data is up there, and you can see what it looks like drilling down over the last several years for different categories of spending. It also will show other municipalities and what that looks like. And again, it's a great tool for a discussion starter, but it doesn't tell the whole story all by itself because it's data, but it's not contextualized. It's just here's the data. So,
Okay.
but it's good to, again, a good place to start.
Great.
And that is cleargov.com.
It is
Org.
cleargov.com.
Yep.
Which got time?
It says
Okay.
.com,
Okay,
yeah.
good, great.
You know, can I just ask a question along that line? You know, it's really great that things are going to be put online as resources for people to see, but I'm wondering, and it's probably just because I'm going through the process of joining the committee and trying to learn things. I wonder if there's a way to incorporate information about what they're looking at, like what a debt exclusion is, or, you know, like that type of information.
Definitions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually just on there looking for
Yeah,
how, like, to
yeah.
break down a definition of something.
That's a great idea.
It may be too far along in the process, but I
think
think
it's
people
ever
might
too
be
far
more
along.
interested if they understand what they're looking at. You
In
know what I
simple
mean?
terms.
I think you're
Yeah.
right.
I think, yeah.
They
I think
have,
that can be done.
I thought that there was, I definitely got a print up from George when me and him joined, and it was everything on what it means, like a definition, and I know that he got it from someone in town hall.
Well, there's also when John originally did the draft of the financial policies, everything was linked to definition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that, I'm trying to think, it's been so long.
I don't know if that's still on our
But-
page.
I don't,
There's a municipal finance glossary,
Right,
and I believe the links went to the municipal finance glossary for riveting reading, like excludable debt, other things, you know?
I will say, I'm not sure how clear and understandable it is for someone reading it. It might be. I know that basically, plain language is helpful.
yeah.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, that
round
you
it
vote an
out.
override for, that you don't, it's,
Yeah.
it's,
Exactly, exactly. Right, because you can look at the numbers and, you can add and subtract and look at a trend line, but like if you can't, like you said, contextualize things, really understand what's going on behind it, it's hard to really understand
Yeah.
what's going on.
I don't see anything on there, on our page. It's just Board of Selectmen policies and procedures and a link to the Board of Selectmen page on ours. There's nothing with that. And also, Michelle's not on our page as a member,
okay,
so maybe we can get it all updated at once.
maybe, we can try.
Sure.
We'll have to go
That'd
back
be
to the
nice.
old one, to see what was on there that we didn't move over. But I thought that the old fiscal policy draft was up there, before.
Yep.
And maybe once it was incorporated into the financial policies of the Board of Selectmen, that it was determined not to leave it there so that we didn't have, if there were changes made there, they wouldn't necessarily be reflected, so it was just a way to not have two documents saying different things.
Yeah.
Which I understand.
I just know in the Board of Selectmen policies, I don't see definitions
Okay.
really either. I've
And
been looking at them
maybe
the
we should
past
just put a
2
link.
weeks. Yeah,
We can just have a link put on our page.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or actually, there's a budget page on, she's got the flyer showing the budget on one of the pages from the home page. I mean, there's probably a place to put it, so I'll
Yeah.
just get in touch with Heather and at some point and ask about that. But it is a good idea. All right. Mark, any more on that, other than we'll get more after you meet with Karen and load data?
Load data and then demonstrate it.
Okay, I will say that on October 11th, we probably won't get to that, because on October 11th, which is our next meeting, we'll be at 6:30 with the Board of Selectmen to discuss policies, and at 7:30, we'll have the public hearing, so.
I just request that it's not on the 25th, because I won't be here, and I'd really like to see it in person.
Okay, well, we can discuss that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can discuss that. And he might not be ready on the 25th, so, it's, all things are possible. He might want to make it pretty. Karen?
Is ClearGov the platform that you're using?
No.
Or are you
He's
creating
using a
it?
different platform.
I'm using a different platform, which is much, in my opinion, more intuitive to the people. Like you can ask questions like how much money was spent on snow removal so far, and you get a number.
Oh.
And
Because we met with representatives from ClearGov, Heather and I did about a week ago, and we viewed their software, and, I mean, it looks nice, but we're looking at a couple of different options as well, because within our existing town financial package, they have an offering as well. So we're just
Yeah, no, it'll be.
looking around at a few different places, but obviously, if there's something that can be done that's more cost-effective and just as user-friendly, then we would prefer to do that.
Absolutely, and I think that
I
once
agree.
once you folks sit down next week, then, if Mark can certainly give you a look at what he's looking at, and,
yeah, and there we are talking no cost.
Right, so that's the
It's an
bonus piece
argument.
right there.
it's definitely a good argument for it.
Yeah.
As long as it works, it's a great argument for it. Actually, well, I should say, do you have any reports for us? I should ask while you're in the vicinity of the mic.
There's just a couple, there's a couple things I just wanted to let you know about. I don't have a lot, but the balance sheet was submitted to the Department of Revenue today for free cash certification, and I estimate that free cash will be $1,530,000 and some change. It's dependent upon, if, as long as they're in agreement with everything that I think is going to happen, that should be the number. The other thing I wanted to talk about, you were talking about growth, and we just received the growth from RRC, who's the company that does our personal property values. Originally, when we estimated new growth, the number that we were using for personal property was $50,000, and the actual number is about $97,000. So right now, based upon the total estimate that we had of new growth of $375,000 versus what we think it's going to be now, there's $37,904 additional dollars available. And that just takes into account the personal property component of the growth, not the real estate. But we have a number from Harold, and he was firm on the real estate number. He didn't think it was gonna change from what he had given us. So if that is the case, then total new growth is $37,000 higher than the $375,000 that we have budgeted right now.
Okay, just to clarify, so that's including real estate and personal property, that is $37,000 more, or it's $37,000 and $37,000?
Well, it's comparing, because right now, Harold's, let me give you some numbers. The real estate growth right now is $314,832. The personal property, he had originally estimated at $50,000, which would have meant that if it did come in at $50,000, it would have been a little bit under our estimate.
Okay.
But based on the growth numbers that we received from the personal property company, that number, the personal property number, is actually $97,000. So if you take Harold's overall estimate of the $314,832 for real estate and the $50 for personal property, and compare that to the
Thank you.
$314,000 in real estate and the $97 in personal property, then we're to the good $37,000.
Okay, so we're putting our right foot in, taking our right foot out, and, okay, got it. So it's what was, since we were short, we're no longer short.
Correct.
Got it, okay.
And that's all I have.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
And now we'll go to minutes. 5 minutes. All right, I know Hannah sent out her minutes.
Yep.
Thank you. It was a nice reminder of what happened at the last meeting. I will, basically, the only thing that I missed, and I should have just got back to you, was that Michelle did volunteer to pick up the library.
Okay, so I thought that was still in discussion. I'm sorry.
Was that still in discussion, or
I
did
thought
you
it was. I
volunteer to
thought it
pick
was
up?
like,
John gave it to me.
Okay, okay. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Give back.
I'm just gonna,
It's yours.
I'm just gonna put in there that Michelle will pick up.
Perfect.
Okay. And then, did everybody else have a chance to look at the minutes?
I did.
Yes.
And do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Yep. There's a motion to accept the minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna take that as Mark made a motion to accept the minutes as amended. And do I have a second?
Seconded?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And aye. All right, and John, you also had other minutes to bring
Well,
forward?
I had opened up Jay's minutes from March 22nd, 2018, looked at them, they looked really good. So I don't know if anybody else has had a chance to look at them yet, but if you have, and if you'd like to, I can move to accept them, but I'll need a second.
Do I have a second?
I personally.
second.
Okay?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye,
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're good on that.
Good. There you go.
Going through the old business.
Just one more thing, and that is that your minutes are really comprehensive, and I very much appreciate the fact that you're getting them there to us the next meeting, which is grand. You do have a couple weeks after that just as a cushion, but anything beyond that is, of course, a violation of meeting law.
Right.
So, but I really appreciate the minutes. Thanks, good job.
Yes. Okay, and then we already did the financial officer reports, department or committee updates. Does anybody have any?
I actually don't have any. I just emailed superintendent again tonight to say, like, can we meet up in October to, if she has anything to bring, to let me know. So
Okay,
hopefully I'll have some next time.
Mark?
I met with Chief Moreno a few times about staffing, where we are in terms of what is needed, understanding a little bit how they spend their time. I think in about 4 weeks I can give a more detailed overview, but we were comparing staffing with other towns like he did in the past many times. In terms of population, I think his plan, like adding 1 more policeman per year for the next 10 years, would do the trick. In terms of population growth, in terms of number of incidents they are dealing with, the situation looks completely different. And we would need something like 5 people right now. And that, if that is confirmed, I think his presentation for next year's budget will slightly be different.
Okay. John?
Capital planning, we were to have had a meeting this last, just 2 days ago, and they got canceled because it didn't fit everybody's schedule. But I believe the meeting is going to be for next week and next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. And the only issue, I just got from Heather today a list of capital requirements for the school buildings. So that's one thing we'll have to factor in.
Okay, Michelle?
I do plan on attending the Library Board of Trustees meeting on October 18th. I reached out to Martha Moore and introduced myself, and so yeah.
Excellent.
Great.
Very good. Okay. Trying to think, we didn't have a Charter Review Committee meeting last night. I believe the Board of Selectmen were busy with another meeting, so that was postponed. So I have nothing to report from that. So I guess with that, I don't look at no comment from the public. Any additional comment, any other comments from anybody on the committee?
No,
Do we have
ma'am.
anything coming up? Our next meeting is scheduled to be October 11th at 6:30. We'll begin with a workshop meeting with the Board of Selectmen, and then at 7:30, hopefully we'll reconvene. Hopefully we'll finish with the Board of Selectmen and then be able to just end that meeting and go on to the public hearing. Is there any kind of a whiff of how many warrant articles there might be, aside from the 6 that planning is possibly coming with?
No.
Okay,
I have no idea. I don't know if Heather knows more than I do, but.
okay. It doesn't really matter, I suppose. We'll just be here till we're done. Then with that said, I will be more than happy to, although actually it looks like we probably won't have time to discuss it, and I'll just put this plug in here because I know my mother's watching, but on October 20th, there is a ham and beans supper being held over at the Eagle House as a fundraiser by the Eagle supporters, so if anybody's interested in getting any tickets, I believe that's the same day as homecoming or something? Is there something else going on that day? Okay, so that'll be going on from 4 to 7 over at the Eagle House. And that's really the only thing that I have in terms of any kind of a comment. So with that said, I would be more than happy to take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, any?
Second.
Anna seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Well, thank you all, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right, thank you.